All right, so let's get started. Hello and welcome to today's Oktopi Talks on World Teachers Day. My name is Nagam. I'm head of marketing at Oktopi, and I'll be moderating today's panel discussion. 2020 put a spotlight on both the education and technology sectors. Many institutions had to rapidly transition to online platforms, and all parties involved, be it school leaders, teachers, students, or parents, they all had to adapt to online learning. It also sparked a wider discussion amongst industry leaders about three key challenges the education sector faces. The first challenge is the state of teachers. Around the world, they are underpaid and overworked. With online teaching becoming an added component to their workload, the role of teachers is more important than ever, and they need to be better supported and rewarded for hard work. The second challenge is the role of the physical classroom. With the move to online learning in 2020, tuition fees were being questioned by parents, and if their children were getting the same education online. And the third challenge is how education will bridge the widening global skills gap. By 2030, McKinsey will estimate that more than 100 million workers in developed economies will need to switch occupations, with almost half requiring more advanced skills. Worldwide, that number shoots up to 1 billion people. It took universities 200 years to produce 200 million graduates worldwide. It's becoming clear that the world needs alternative, effective, and scalable learning pathways to fill the growing number of new job vacancies over the next 20 years. So I'm thrilled to be joined today by Emilie Thomas, co-founder and CEO of Oktopi, and Sam Tayan, managing director of Zoom in the Middle East, North Africa, and Pakistan, to provide their insight and point of view on how technology will enable teachers to embrace the future of learning and overcome these challenges. Now, remember, you can ask your questions using the Q&A button, and we will address them either during or at the end of the panel discussion. Welcome, Emilie, and welcome, Sam. Before we get started with the discussion, maybe tell us a little bit about yourselves and your backgrounds.
Sure. Emilie, would you like to go?
Should I go ahead?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I'm Emilie. I'm the founder of oktopi.ai. I am also an educator. I am a lifelong learner. I believe in hybrid model of education. I believe in self-directed education and everything alternative to, come up with new ideas to, help the future generation thrive in the world that is waiting for them. As a lifelong learner, I do believe that it will be the norm. It's already there. We all took a course out there. I have an engineering background and a PhD in comparative studies. And my mission is to empower educators and help them grow with their students and impact their students the best way possible.
And my name is Sam Tayan. So I manage the Zoom here in the Middle East and North Africa and Pakistan. And I've been in the tech business for quite a while, as you can see from my gray hairs. And I'm really excited at what we've seen over the past period, particularly in partnership with Oktopi, in terms of the future of learning.
Amazing. Great to have you both today at Oktopi Talks. So let's get started. What are the technologies that teachers need to be able to manage their workloads and so on in today and potentially in the future?
So I can answer to that because we're creating a technology platform. So we've noticed, especially if you take only the K-12 and university in developed countries where the school system has enough money to buy platforms, some school can deal with more than 15 different platforms just to manage their classes, their teachers. So they would need technology like learning management system for sending some assignments to their student, or as a portfolio to receive assignment from their students as well. They would need a school management system to manage their teachers, their students. They would need some reporting platform for everything that has to do with scoring and grades and report cards. They would need a communication system, and most of the time it's different. They would have one for teachers, one for parents, one for students, and on top of that, newsletters and things like that. They would need some payment gateway to receive tuition. And we can add a lot of platforms and all the regular to create content, so like PowerPoint and so on, and obviously live technology as well for distant learning when they need to do that. And today, even if a lot of students went back to school, they are still using a lot of live for all the parents meeting, the teacher meetings, and so on. If you take the wider educators segment with entrepreneur educators, you would need to add to that a proper way to get discoverable, to market your classes, and to manage this aspect as well. So it's a lot of platforms to deal with. And the important thing is that these platforms don't necessarily talk together. They are not synchronized. And a lot of them don't bring a very important thing, which is analytics. And on top of that, you have to add all the content. So teachers today are using a lot of content providers, so publishers, content app, language, math, you name it. You have a lot of things out there. And there is no real place where you can connect all of these together to have, you know, an inclusive experience. So I would say the opportunities here for the technology provider is to simplify this process, because it takes a lot of time to deal with all of that. And what we want for educators is to really spend time on what matters, which is impacting their students, spending time creating these bonds with their students and sharing what they like. So the challenge for the technology platforms today is to provide end-to-end experience to the educators and to the students as well. And if you add the parents, to the parents as well, to add analytics and make sure that the analytics cover all these different aspects and connect them together, including live as well. So adding this analytics to live and really provide an integrated solution that is simple, that is accessible. Most of the time, technology is very expensive, and teachers or schools, public schools, don't have necessarily the budget for that. And so this technology doesn't take time. Okay, so we need a technology that helps you achieve your mission of impacting your student and not taking from your time. So it has to be smart, it has to be cheap, and it has to be integrated, which is the challenge today.
Right. Sam, what are your thoughts on this? Where do you see technology play a role in teachers managing their workload, and especially from Zoom's point of view, and your work in the ed tech sector?
So I think everything, you know, obviously I concur with everything Emilie said. I think just to encapsulate this, obviously teachers notoriously overworked, always got a lot to do. And part of obviously the difficulty of a teacher's job is repetition. You will often have scenarios where you know, there could be bad weather or something, So only half the students show up for class in a traditional environment. So the teacher has to double up their work in order to reproduce what they did to coach the laggards or whatever. So modern technology has allowed, and the ability to, for example, to record Zoom meetings of classrooms, of classes, allows teachers to scale. So it allows repetition in case they need to, for some of the students, repeat the class. It allows the ability to scale beyond the physical attributes of the school. If we look at a wider context, you have accessibility, getting to school. I mean, I'm talking about bad weather, but maybe there isn't bad weather, but maybe there's a lot of distance to get students to school. Most of the region we are in has a young population, and which means that there are tens of thousands of pupils coming into the school system every year. And you got, various options in order to accommodate them, the most costly of which is probably building thousands of schools. The second aspect is tutoring. So it is a fact that many students will require maybe some extra lessons, either in subjects that they need to catch up on or subjects they want to simply get better at. And tutoring is, again, something which is really awkward to do. If you as a teacher needs to tutor 3 or 4 students and you need to physically get round to their houses, this is a proper logistics nightmare, potentially in the city with traffic. With something like Zoom, you can duplicate the materials, you can access learning banks, you can use the kind of tools that, as Emilie said, can give you analytics and give you scale without the need to move around, which is great. And as a parent, not having a tutor sat at the dinner table at 6 o'clock in the evening is wonderful, and it's something we can all well do without.
Right. So that brings me to my second question, which is, the future of learning. And that's really why we're here today. So, we're talking about technologies that can support workloads, and both of you touched on very important points, especially about integration and repetition. And as I mentioned earlier, the role of the classroom is being challenged now. So what does the future of learning look like? Does the physical classroom still have a role?
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't mind, I'll pick this one up, and I'm sure Emilie has some really excellent things as well to add. It certainly does. So the classroom is right there, but in the same way as with other aspects, the ability to record, the ability to conduct synchronous and asynchronous, so live teaching and recorded teaching, the ability to allow kids who missed class because they were late or bad weather or maybe caught a cold, is just magical. When I was at school, which was a really long time ago, none of this was possible. You missed class, you missed class. I used to have bad eyesight, so I didn't see too well. Again, if I was at the back of the classroom, that was that. As far as I was concerned, I might as well not be in the classroom. Technology adds to that. But I think it's very important to realize that human interaction is vital, particularly the younger the children, the more human interaction really is very important as well. So I think everything has a role to play. I think as you tilt towards higher education, so universities and so on, maybe secondary school kids and stuff like that, you're seeing a greater role in technology. But I think the affordability of that technology with platforms such as oktopi are vital, because saying this stuff is available is one thing, but saying that it's available in a very affordable envelope is really liberating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree to that. I agree that the physical classroom will not disappear, but the way we reimagine this physical classroom and these interactions inside this classroom might be different. It might not be, the traditional classroom where the teacher is delivering something to the students all sitting there and listening to the teacher, but really a classroom with more interaction. And And I really do believe in the hybrid model for these many reasons that you said, Sam, and even, you know, like, and we could find a lot of reason. You could be traveling with your parents. You have more and more digital nomads out there. You could be doing sports in a professional level, and you need to travel for competition, and you can still stay connected to your studies. So which is something that didn't happen in the past. There is a study that shows that 75% of students would prefer a hybrid learning system over a fully online or fully offline. So that says a lot about, you know, this experience we had with the pandemic, where everybody was doing distance, but then a lot of people realized that, yes, maybe this is the way to go. If we design this hybrid classroom in a good way. And so the challenge is to find this balance between offline and online, this balance between live and asynchronous. And it's a challenge because it's not the same for everyone. Some students would prefer to be live with the teacher, and other students would thrive at a self-paced or being independent or doing their studies alone. So, and that's why I think that the hybrid classroom is the future, especially now with technology and with the advancement of big data and AI, where you can connect, you know, the platforms and the live, and having information about your student. You can really design the best way possible, the best hybrid class for your student or for your cohort. And talking about live, and maybe Sam, you can give us example. There are a lot of, you know, very exciting things coming from Zoom, especially virtual reality and all of this. But another challenge is how we can make this live and augmented educational experience for the students as well. So the participants feel included, they can share their material, they can engage with their peers, with their teachers, and also an augmented experience for the teacher with analytics, helping the teacher impact, you know, the learning journey with the right balance of offline, online, of live and asynchronous.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I see hybrid learning as the way forward. I teach a university level class, and we're already experimenting with that. And live video is actually a key component in that. Along with, I think analytics is something that is somewhat lacking, and we're going to get to that in a second. But Sam, I'd like to hear from you on, you know, from your standpoint, how has live video transformed teaching and learning? What are the things that, you know, what are the key learnings that kind of came up and that, you know, Zoom is taking away and working on? And what does the future look like in this space in the context of hybrid learning?
So, you know, if we wind the clock back to May of last year, April, May of last year, there was obviously a very rapid adoption of you know, Zoom in the classroom. There's many things which we immediately picked up and made rapid improvements to the product. So whether it be in security, whether it be management of the classes. So, you know, security on one front is things like encryption, which makes sure that, you know, at a sort of a nuts and bolts level, you're safe. And there's also aspects such as waiting rooms, being able to identify the students, making sure the people who you expect to be in class are, and really paralleling what physically you do as a teacher. You know, you maybe take a roster, maybe check people coming into the class. Obviously, if somebody just wanders in and you don't know who they are, you won't let them sit down. So all those kind of real world experiences, what we have made sure is that within Zoom, you've got safety, you've got security, you've got ease of management for overworked teachers who, you know, don't want yet another tool to use. It's important to make it intuitive, easy to use. The ability to use tools to record and so on. I'll make a point here. In the UK, I think sometime in September, 13.7% of secondary school pupils are absent. That's a big number. That's 1 in, I think, 7 or something like that. It's 1 in 7. If you can, in a traditional schooling system, that means that every single day, 1/7 of your productivity as teachers is not there because these are classically absent. Again, hybrid learning lets you address that because it means you can record the classes. It means you can allow access. Also, in terms of analytics, I think one of the things which is always mentioned is, in class, teacher sees people, it can tell from the body language or whatever. Live analytics can also allow, within tools such as Oktopi in association with Zoom, can allow teachers a really granular way of understanding who's participating, who's not participating. They can potentially look at within third-party products, you can see, who's asked a lot of questions, who hasn't. Allow folks who metaphorically would be sat at the back of the class to get more involved. You don't have that physical restriction of some guys at the back and some guys at the front. In university, this is also particularly true because you have big lecture theatres, and we've all been there. When you're at the back of a lecture theatre which has a couple of hundred people in it, you're far less engaged than when you're up front. But with virtual tools like Oktopi in association with Zoom, everybody's on a level playing field.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. And just, you were talking about granularity. So Emilie, I want to ask you, because you also brought up analytics, and what is the role of AI in the future of learning, in hybrid learning? Where do you see it going?
Yeah, so I think there is a fear from teachers that AI will replace the teacher, and we've all had this, image of a robot teacher or whatever. But no, I think the role of AI is really to be a partner to the teacher, to really understand the student is dealing with or she is dealing with. So AI and data will help personalization, because today it is clear that learning is something personal. We are far from, the standardized system. We've seen the limits of that, and we're going back to this personalization. And it's very important for the teacher to understand the student context, the global context of the student. And even in an offline classroom, in person, you don't necessarily know the full context of a student. So when you use technology and live technology and even AI, we can really track meaningful and measure meaningful data coming from the student, but also coming from the teacher. So it's important for the teacher to know if the content that he's providing or the teaching style he has is working with a specific student or a cohort of students. And understanding the context is key, because you have so many dimensions that you can measure about the context of a student. You have timing, you have the language spoken at home or in the community versus the education language. You have the type of intelligence, interest, you have the social background, the history of your student. And to give you a very simple example, this is something that happened to us as a family during the pandemic and during the distant learning, is that my son, at that time he was 6 years old, didn't do his writing exercise in the morning like he was usually doing at school, and he did it in the afternoon. And he came to me and he showed me his book, and he tells me, look, Mom, when I write in the afternoon, I write so much better than I write in the morning. And yes, the difference was so obvious. And he was like, you know what, Mom, I will do my writing exercise every afternoon. I said, okay. And the progression was phenomenal. Even the teacher couldn't believe. She was like, what happened? I don't know what happened. And I told her, it's just that my son is doing his exercise in the afternoon. And she told me, oh, I wish I knew when he was in the classroom, because we used to do the writing exercise first thing in the morning. And even for me as a parent, doing, as a working parent and organizing the schedule around this, distant learning, I could know, then I started just looking at the timing of things, and I could know that in the morning with math, he didn't need any help. It was independent. I could have my meetings at the same time, could organize my time with my son's schedule. That just looking at one thing, which is timing, and you can have 100 of different dimensions that you could measure, but looking at one thing can have a tremendous impact on the student learning and the confidence. He was feeling much more confident with writing. He used to hate it, now he loves it. He has a very neat writing. Before that, we couldn't understand what he was writing. And it was just changing one thing, which is the time. So this is what we mean by, how AI can help in the future with these, few changes that will make a huge difference for the students, but also helping the teacher organize. Because then even back in the classroom, the physical classroom, or even, with a hybrid model, you could, as a teacher, organize your groups differently. You could have these kids working on, math at a certain time, and while the other kids do something else. And you could personalize in a way that is meaningful.
Wow, that's really insightful. Absolutely. AI will definitely have a role, like you said, but I guess the question becomes then, how does AI in that sense, and also, video and all of these tools that are integrated, how would it enable teachers to do personalized teaching or personalized learning at scale? I think, in the current setting right now, teachers don't become teachers for the money. Let's face it. They become teachers because they're passionate, and they stay as teachers because they're passionate. So how are they able to do that at scale? Because it feels like, a teacher at firsthand hearing this feels like it's just more work. But how can technology enable them to do it at scale?
So, I mentioned before, obviously, if you're a teacher, you can record classes, so you can utilize, you don't have to maybe do one-to-one tutoring as much as you would have to allow kids to catch up when they miss the class. You don't have to take account of that. You have the ability to let people run over. And as Emilie said, you also have the ability to optimize. So you can time shift activities. If writing or reading works better in the afternoon, then do so. Some kids function in different ways. Maybe they can concentrate. One of the big issues obviously was concentration. So again, when you've got recorded classes, you have the ability to go back, maybe, if you have a better span of attention at a different time of the day or whatever. So all of this, I think, reduces the load on teachers. Now there is, and this is what obviously we've spent a lot of time as Zoom, making the tools as easy to use, as intuitive as possible, to absolutely reduce the load and make sure that teachers can, do what they're good at, teach, and not be grappling with technology, which is complicated. So we do our best to make it as easy as possible.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. And this is one more part that AI is allowing, is that when you are in the classroom, you have all these, like impressions and feeling, and you go with your gut feelings, and this takes time. Whereas with numbers, you could quite quickly recognize some patterns and create cohorts. So personalization could be at a cohort level. And then you'll always have, like the extremities, the extreme cases where you would need to do something really different, but then you would create different cohorts, and you would have the data that backs that. And technology, as Sam was saying, has to be easy enough, intuitive, so you don't lose time, and you remove the noise. You remove all the noise, all the paperwork, and you really focus on what matters.
Absolutely. And last but not least, I'd like to hear both your thoughts on what changes need to take place today in the education space to close the global skills gap.
Wow, that's
I know it's a loaded question, right?
Yeah, I'll let Emilie answer first.
So I was thinking about the numbers that you gave at the beginning in the introduction, Naham, about all these like hundreds of millions of people we need to upskill or reskill. We're also talking about lifelong learning, which is becoming, the trend, and which is a necessity. There is a very interesting number that I've come across lately, which is the level of confidence recruiters and leaders of company have in new graduates' ability to perform well in their first job. And this is only 15%, which is very low. And when you ask the new graduates the same question, their own confidence, the confidence level in performing well in their first job, it's 90%. So there is clearly a problem here, a complete disconnection between those who are supposedly being prepared to join the workforce and the challenges that are faced by those who are running the workforce. So I guess this is a problem that needs to be tackled. We don't have the time anymore. It took 200 years, you said, to produce these 200 million graduates. Now we don't have the time anymore. It's coming in a few years. The opportunities in education technology, it's really to create this space for a better connection between education and what's happening in the workforce and the challenges that this workforce will face in the future, even in the near future. So what companies are trying to solve today and what they are planning to do to solve the future challenges. And I think that technology should embrace a model that is based on not anymore a subject base. We will always need, to upskill in different subjects, but I think it's important to go back into mentorship, apprenticeship, and accountability. Than an education system that is based on subjects. So we have to really invent alternative pathways to the traditional schooling or university system, where in this traditional system, everything is focusing around the curriculum, the subject. And I think the alternative pathways that we have to invent today should really focus around skills. And the trick is that you cannot really learn skills, what we call today soft skills. I don't like this term. You cannot learn these things in books, or you cannot learn in a classroom where the teacher is delivering any kind of knowledge. You have to learn that through experience. You have to learn that with people. You have to learn that with a mentor, with an educator that really create these experiences for you. And this is why maybe the first generation of education technology was focusing on content, so creating more and more content, because it was following this mainstream of what we know about school, the curriculum, the subject-driven thing. And today, we've built so much content that you could learn quantum physics on YouTube. And we don't need more of that. We need, to learn about empathy, about resilience. In any interview you're going as a fresh grad, you won't be asked about timetables or things like that, but you will be asked about how you manage your time, how you resolve conflicts, how you handle stressful situation, about how you take decision, how you work in a team or independently, how to compromise, and how you handle failure. And these are things that needs to be experienced at a very young age, and all along your K-12 and university years, and even after. Handling failure is something very difficult for maybe my generation, where we needed to perform all the time, and we didn't know that failure is just a learning experience, right? So we need to equip people with skills, and we need to create this space where there is a clear connection between education, learning, and what's happening in the real world. Where people create companies, have ideas, make these ideas happen, and really focus on that and on accountability as well.
I love what you mentioned about soft skills, and that you don't like that term. Simon Sinek actually calls them human skills. So I think that's actually a better term for it, that you need those human skills. And I always say, I mean, I'm a graduate of computer science, and I've worked in, different functions throughout my career. And what you said resonated so much with me, because if a business person talks to a tech person or a person in an IT department, their language is just completely different, and it's so difficult to communicate. And one of my early roles was bridging literally that gap, because I studied both, and so I was able to do that. But yeah, things like communication, empathy, failure, and so on are also very important. Sam, I'd like to hear from you on how tech companies can bridge that gap, especially since they're the ones that are in need of that workforce in the future.
Absolutely. I think bridging that gap is very important. I think providing the tools, providing the sense of confidence and safety in those tools is really important as well. And also the universality and the affordability. I think you're quite right. Bridging the global skills gap has a lot to do with, in my opinion, accessibility. And one of the great things about technology tools, I mean, we've all watched a video online to figure out how to fix our bicycle. We've all, as Emilie said, seen some really advanced courses. Emilie mentions that you can learn, astrophysics online. But this is really liberating, because there's also a great cost benefit as well. You can learn French from people in France, even though you're not in France yourself. The right diction, the right, learning exotic languages like Japanese and Chinese may become much more accessible potentially in regions of the world which are very far from those countries. Again, so technology plays that role, I think, in kind of flattening the earth in that respect. Removing borders in respect to accessing the talent which allows you to learn, and also accessing the information.
Absolutely. We have a few minutes left, so I'll open up the floor to any questions that the audience might have for Emilie or Sam. You can just click on the Q&A button at the menu bar. Okay. Okay, I don't think there's any questions. So just before we wrap up, just a quick thought from you on the role that teachers will play in bridging that skills gap. So we obviously have a lot of teachers that teach vocational skills, human skills, but also your traditional subjects in in the academic world. So how do teachers fit into that picture?
I think, if you teach a subject, doesn't mean that you have to forget about your subject and only do soft skill or human skills. You could, bring both and just change the way, you're teaching a subject in a more, experience way, project-based, try to reach as well people from abroad with live technology or with technology platform, so you can add more experiences for your students.
Awesome. Sam, one question for you. What are the essential Zoom features recommended for teachers to use? For example, whiteboard, new translation tools. What are your thoughts on that?
So definitely, use the tools such as waiting rooms, video waiting rooms, essentially, use the security tools, use the control tools to give the degree of interactivity that you want to give to your students. Do look at recording for classes which you've spent a lot of time preparing to allow students to access them, maybe to do some revision later on or whatever. I think these are all things you should look at. And also look at, there is a world of third-party, fantastic solutions such as Oktopi. I think you should, obviously look in that direction and look to, add elements. I mean, Zoom is a platform and we give you a lot of great stuff, and we give you a lot of great stuff you can add on by third parties as well.
Awesome. And with that, I'd like to thank you both, Emilie and Sam, for your time today. This was a very insightful discussion, and I hope our attendees enjoyed today's webinar with Oktopi Talks. Thank you everybody for attending, and stay tuned for future Oktopi Talks. Just look out for it in your inbox. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.